The Renaissance. We get sold this idea of a golden age, full of marble statues, divine frescoes, and brilliant minds and tasteful tights, all politely rediscovering classical knowledge. It's presented as this clean, well-lit period of human achievement. You imagine artists calmly contemplating the divine beauty of the human form. The reality, of course, was substantially stickier. The same hands that painted ethereal angels were, quite often, recently used for brawling in a tavern, fleeing from the police, or abducting a nun. It turns out the barrier between sacred inspiration and public nuisance was thin, shockingly thin. These weren't just artists, they were chaotic human beings living in a chaotic time, and their personal lives were often the exact opposite of the serene beauty they were paid to create. Let's begin with a man of the cloth, because that's always a good place to start. Fra Filippo Lippi was a Carmelite friar. This meant he took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. He was, on paper, dedicated entirely to God. In practice, his dedication had exceptions. While serving as chaplain to a convent of nuns in Prato, he met a novice named Lucrezia Buti. Instead of, ministering to her spiritual needs, he asked her to pose for a painting of the Madonna. Then he abducted her during a public festival and refused to give her back. They had a son, who also became a famous painter, Filippino Lippi. The whole affair was so spectacularly public that his patron, Cosimo de' Medici himself, had to ask the Pope to formally release them from their vows. The best part? For the rest of his career, Lippi's favorite model for the Virgin Mary was, you guessed it, the runaway nun he lived with. Look at his Madonnas. They're not visions of divine purity, they're portraits of his girlfriend. If Lippi was a romantic comedy, Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio was a dark, violent thriller. Caravaggio didn't just break the rules of art with his dramatic use of light and shadow, chiaroscuro, he broke pretty much every other rule too. His police record in Rome was a mile long, featuring everything from carrying a sword without a permit to throwing a plate of hot artichokes at a waiter. He was famously, violently sensitive. This all came to a head in 1606 when he killed a man named Ranuccio Tomassoni. The official story is that it was a dispute over a tennis score. This is the 17th century equivalent of saying two mobsters had a disagreement. In reality, it was about debts, honor, and almost certainly a woman. Caravaggio spent the rest of his short life on the run, painting some of his most profound and desperate masterpieces while dodging assassins and bounty hunters. He painted saints who looked like tired laborers and holy scenes that felt like they were happening in the back room of a grimy bar, because that was his world. Caravaggio's issues often stemmed from how he made his sacred art. He had a habit of using common people, beggars and prostitutes as his models. This was revolutionary, grounding divine stories in a gritty reality. It was also, to the church, deeply offensive. His masterpiece, Death of the Virgin, was commissioned for a church in Rome, but was flat out rejected. Why? The priests were horrified. His model for the Virgin Mary was allegedly a well-known prostitute, possibly his own lover, who had recently been fished out of the Tiber River. They saw a dead, bloated, very human woman on the canvas, not the idealized, peacefully assumed Queen of Heaven. They wanted transcendence. Caravaggio gave them truth, the same truth that got him chased out of town. It seems patrons loved the idea of a revolutionary artist right up until the point he did something revolutionary. And then there's Benvenuto Cellini, goldsmith, sculptor, musician, soldier, and, if you believe his own autobiography, a world champion murderer and lover. His book is less a memoir and more the longest, most elaborate brag in literary history. Cellini writes about his life with the kind of casual hyperbole you just can't make up. He describes, in detail, multiple murders he committed, usually for perceived slights, framing them as totally justified acts of a misunderstood genius. He claims to have personally shot and killed the Constable of Bourbon during the sack of Rome. He talks about summoning legions of demons in the Colosseum with a necromancer. Amidst all this, he was creating some of the most delicate and beautiful sculptures of the era, like his famous salt cellar. He was also put on trial multiple times for sodomy, which he mostly just complains about as an inconvenience orchestrated by his rivals. Reading his autobiography is like listening to the most fascinating, talented, and utterly amoral person you've ever met tell you their life story. You don't believe half of it, but you can't stop listening. Finally, we have a scandal that wasn't about a single life, but a work of art so scandalous it was ordered to be destroyed on sight. Meet Giulio Romano, a top student of the master Raphael. Romano created a series of 16 drawings called I Modi, which translates to the ways, or more bluntly, the positions. They were explicit depictions of couples in various sexual acts. The engraver who made prints of them, Marcantonio Raimondi, was promptly thrown in prison by the Pope. The printing plates were seized, and all copies were ordered to be burned. This was the first major clash between the new technology of the printing press and state censorship. But it gets better. The notorious writer Pietro Aretino, a man who perfected the art of blackmail, saw the surviving prints, wrote a series of equally explicit sonnets to accompany each one, and got them published again. So the defining masterpieces of the High Renaissance weren't just serene Madonnas, they were also the era's equivalent of a top-shelf magazine, a project that landed one artist in jail and made another a legend of subversive literature. It reminds us that for every piece of art made to please God, there was probably another made to annoy a pope. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!